All right, good, everybody. Um, okay, so we just think we're going to be here for this 90 minutes, I think. We're going and think just, in the way that lamas would say, oh, we set our motivation for this activity. Well, we might say, what's our purpose? Why are we here? What's our goal? What are we trying to achieve? Why are we sitting here together? Well, I'm going to go blah, blah, using Buddha's teachings, and we're going to listen. And that really does me too. I promise I'm listening as I talk. Things are processing all the time. And we're going to look at this idea of compassion and why it should be courageous, what that means, actually. It's kind of interesting. And the point is we're going to take it. It's given us advice. We don't have to take the advice. Boss, we are. But if there's even 1% of what you hear that's useful, then put it into practice. It's got to be practical. Can't just stick in your head, it's got to be useful. It's like if this were cooking class, if I just raved on about how nice cakes were and you didn't hear any recipes, you'd be disappointed. So try and hear the recipes in the words that I'm saying. Because that's really what essentially you're trying to do as a Buddhist. There's these cliched ideas you're a Buddhist if you kind of close your eyes and watch your navel or something. But really what you're doing as being a Buddhist is reprogramming your world in a different way, that's how it is. So, okay, this is why we're together. Think like this. So, yeah, why courageous compassion? It sounds kind of curious, doesn't it? Well, there's different Buddhist teachings. And as I quote all the time, there's this lovely analogy that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So, you could say that the wisdom wing is the first stages of practice, which is where you put yourself together. You start to really become your own self, etc., etc. And the key point about this part of the work is, which the typical kind of good spiritual practice, being a nice ethical person. The key point for the Buddha is you're the beneficiary of that. This is the method for you to turn yourself into a reasonable, nice person. In other words, away from being neurotic and deluded and up and down like a yo-yo and depressed and jealous and angry and all the rest. That causes us total misery, and this is why we harm others. So the wisdom is all about yourself in a way, putting yourself together. But the consequence of this is you can't help you can't help but open your eyes and go, wow, we're all in the same boat. Oh my God, look at this world. Everyone's suffering. Everybody's struggling. Everyone is depressed. Everyone's angry. People want to be happy, but keep losing the plot, So from the wisdom, when you learn, it's taking Buddha's approach, really, it's his method for you to get happy. And his essential approach is that what goes on in our mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering, which itself is a bit of a shock. We don't believe this. We kind of know the mind plays a role, but we really don't believe this. The view of the world is that the outside world is this is pretty evident. And look at our behavior. We really believe the outside world is the source of my happiness and suffering. But the Buddha's got this very radically different view. He doesn't argue that it doesn't play a role. He's just saying, hey guys, you're missing the main point, which is where, we start to look into the mind. The mind is Buddha's expertise. What goes on inside out between our ears. And it's not in the cliched view, it's not a question of just making all the thoughts go away. This is, again, a cliched idea. It's learning to know your mind intimately and well, and to be very authentic and to acknowledge and recognize the parts of your mind that make you crazy and then cause you to harm others. Yes, the boyfriend plays a role. Yes, some people are kind to us and some people are mean to us. That's a fact. But the Buddha's point is, that's fine. You get them to change. Does, then you're fine. But what if he doesn't? What if he can't change the outside world? And this is the real point. The Buddha says we have this incredible potential to unpack and unravel our minds and therefore actually reconfigure our minds into the mind of a happy, wise, fully content, fulfilled, compassionate person. That's the approach. That's Buddha's approach. Essentially, that's what being a Buddhist means. So, okay, what's that got to do with compassion? Well, right, first of all, we can see the more I'm caught up with my own misery, the more I'm caught up with my own depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, self-confidence, angry, depressed, join the universe, folks, the more I am miserable, but the more I'm completely, absolutely locked from other people. I can't see past my own nose. And if I do see the outside world, I see it only in terms of whether it satisfies my needs. So we become very self-centered. So then naturally one of the consequences of working on the wisdom on your own mind is you become more happy and more wise and more content. But like I said before, you kind of open your eyes because you're more connected to others now. The way Buddha talks about ego and why it causes us suffering is that we're separate from others. We're cut off. In the grip of this kind of ego grasping, we become more fulfilled, but we also become more spacious and more connected to others. And that's where compassion would naturally, kind of in a logical way, would just naturally start. But the crucial thing is this. Why courageous compassion is this. If we take this view, and this is expressed in the Buddha's teachings called the Four Noble Truths, his very first teaching, where he lays out what suffering is, what the causes are, how to get rid of it. Like I said before, that what goes on in our mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering. And when we can start to really, live according to this, we become very courageous, we become less self-piteous, we become more brave, we become more, we really recognize that, we are the one who produces ourself. This is really the main one. We see we can change our mind, and by changing our mind, but we can learn to become more brave and learn to navigate the difficulties of life without losing the plot. So then, because we understand that the mind plays a role, the mind is the main player, when we start in the sense that wisdom is like having compassion for yourself, then you start to realize, oh my God, we're on the same boat. Look at all these poor human beings out there really believe that the outside world is the cause of their suffering, really believing the outside world is the cause of their happiness, and trying frantically to change the outside world. That's where we put all our energy. Then you start to realize they're just like you, and then you realize, well, then you start to have compassion. And that doesn't mean, this is the point now, when we think of suffering, I mean, the Buddha's analysis of suffering is very clear when you listen to this very first teaching he gave after he got enlightened back, 2,500 years ago. He presented this Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. There are causes. You can get rid of them, and how to do it. So the first one is there is suffering. And the point here is the Buddha's analysis of what suffering is so the obvious level of suffering is, the mean boyfriend, your pain in your knee, the boss sacking you, or any of the other terrible things that happen. Look at the world. This is the obvious level of suffering. And everybody, we know we don't want that. So because that's the only level of suffering we call suffering, that's the only suffering we have compassion for. So we have suffering, we have compassion for the ones who are poor. We have compassion for, the sick, for the poor, for the victims, for the ones who are being bombed or raped or terrorized. So that's logical, because that's what we think suffering is when we're selves. And the boyfriend is mean when you're very sick or whatever. But the Buddha's pointing out, the more we understand our mind, the more we see we're going to start to see there are these subtle levels of suffering, that the suffering is in the mind. The attachment itself, the anger itself, the jealousy itself, the depression itself, that is suffering, not just the things that happen to us. This is a subtler level of suffering. Now, when you think that, look at the world, and now you suddenly include 50 million more people, the whole world, in fact. So if you look at suffering only as those who are badly done by, only those who are harmed, brutalized, and there's plenty of those. I mean, the world is a shocking place. People terrorized. There's unbelievable racism over centuries, and it's like embedded in cultures, racism, sexism, all these things we all know about. There's no question that that is suffering, and that's a pretty evident level of suffering. It's pretty clear. But there's other level of suffering. But we sort of, if we think of, so we suddenly think of a person who isn't, say, suffering from who isn't suffering from poverty, who isn't suffering in a war zone, and then we think, well, what are you going to have compassion for them for? Look at them, they've got a nice life, no one's mean to them, they've got, their life is lovely, they've got a good husband, they've got good kids, they've got money in the bank. What do you mean they're suffering? And this is the point. You yourself in your own life, if you're nice, you're not suffering, you're not suffering from sexism, you're not suffering from poverty, but and then you start hearing Buddha talk about suffering, and then you go, oh, well, I'm not suffering, no, I'm not poor. But then you're having a mental breakdown. So what do we do then? We feel guilty. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I've got a nice husband. Why am I depressed? I'm not suffering from racism or sexism. So then we get all guilty. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling suffocated all. But the Buddha's real expertise is looking into the mind and seeing, that these neuroses are the source of unbelievable pain. But if you're impatient with your own and don't think that's suffering, and you beat yourself up and you feel guilty because you feel depressed, then we don't ever look at somebody else who's depressed. We think, oh, well, stop complaining. You've got a good life. So really, this first looking at yourself and becoming your own therapist, the way Lama Yeshe put deeply into your own mind, then you see the suffering. I remember when I'm, working with people in prison since in the mid-90s, we started this project called Liberation Prison Project. And I remember starting to get letters. It started when a young Mexican-American young guy is 18. He wrote, I was based in California, and I was editing our magazine, Mandala Magazine, and I got this letter. I remember it was April 1996. I got this letter. I mean, I let it sit there for a month or so. I didn't answer it, but eventually I answered it. He told me he's 18, Mexican-American, from Los Angeles, been in gangs since he's 11, and then in prison since he's 12. He's now 18. Prisons, and then he was 16. He got out briefly, and then he was tried in one of the gang fights. He'd been totally devoted to these gangs. Then he was given 3 life sentences. He hadn't killed anybody. It was just because of the severe in the gangs in the prisons. This, into solitary confinement. And in the States, and certainly in California now, it's common everywhere, but back then it was considered against human rights. Actually, it's considered against human rights. This particular prison called Pelican Bay, it's just south of Oregon on the California coast. And he told me he was there. And that had been started especially to take the gangsters off the yards in the main prisons, because the gang activity is huge in the prisons, and that to house them all in these particularly strict units. So he was in this security housing unit, as they call it. A couple of thousand guys are there, the heavy duty dudes in the prisons from the heavy duty gangs in Los Angeles, well, certainly the Mexicans. I mean, it's really actually, I learned quite a few things about gangs. It was very funny. I mean, it's not funny, it's funny, whatever you like. So, I mean, I don't know what I've never met. I mean, I joke about Mexicans. Please forgive me if you're Mexican. I'm not being rude. I love big-hearted people brought up in gangs. They knew nothing else since they're kids. They're 11, So there was Arturo. His name was, but he calls himself AJ. So, I mean, he told me about the gangs. I learned about the gangs in Californian prisons. Like on the streets, there's a gang every block, hundreds of gangs. Now, but if you're in prison, you suddenly join a new gang. There are precisely 2 Mexican gangs. There's one Mexican gang called the Northerners, whatever it is in Spanish, and there's one Mexican gang called the Southerners. Well, the Southerners are roughly from Los Angeles, and the Northerners are roughly from San Francisco. And in the prisons, so you and I, let's say JD and I are these heavy-duty dudes in Los Angeles, and we are the mortal enemies because we're in 2 separate gangs in Los Angeles. And then overnight we get put into prison. Well, overnight we will become blood brothers because we're both from Los Angeles, and now we become a member of the Southerners gang. So it's proves how hilarious it is, whatever. Anyway, I joke that I'm a Southerner because all the Mexicans I know in prison in California are from Los Angeles. What to do? It's my gang, Anyway, whatever. I'm losing the plot here. So the point is, when I started listening to his story, what am I talking about? Oh, yeah, okay. So anyway, Arturo. So he's now out of prison. He's been in prison since he's 12, and he got out a few years ago. He's age 40 with gray hair, and he's doing really well. He's in LA, and he worked so hard on himself. Unbelievable, I have such admiration. And but the thing is, there he was in his own cell, 23 hours a day with 10 books, the inside of a pen. If you have the outside, you'll stab your cellmate. You're these 2-man cells. He lived in those cells for years because he was put into this solitary confinement because he'd been a troublemaker on the yards. They all have these gang fights. He wrote to Lama Zopa. That's what I'm getting to. He wrote to Lama Zopa. And since that time, probably hundreds of prisoners have written to Lama Zopa. And Rinpoche asked me recently, to put out this book. Powerful. So the key thing, that one of the things he said to AJ, there's AJ, young man, with intensely heavy sentence, a really good person actually, but brought up in these gangs, but genuinely good heart, very intelligent, really trying to change himself with a good spiritual practice, living in this cell 23 hours a day. The noise, they tell me the noise in these cells, in this security housing unit, it's like being in a rock concert all day. So, I mean, if you think of your ordinary life, you don't live like that. You're like living on a freeway, And then the food is disgusting. You're treated like an animal with respect, all these things, blah, blah. So then he started becoming a practitioner in his own little cell. And so he wrote to Lama Zopa. And Rinpoche, one of the key things he said to him, and this is something he said to him, and the point is, AJ and my friends in prison understand this. He said, your prison is nothing in comparison with the inner prison of ordinary people. The prison of attachment, the prison of anger, the prison of jealousy, the prison of pride, etc. Now, on the face of it, it sounds kind of speak this way, you know, almost insulting to this poor guy, this young Latino boy, you know, into this with this intense 25 years to life, 3 sentences for just having a gang fight, because the sentencing is so sounds almost insulting. But the point is, I mean, I've had letters from hundreds of this prison project. We probably got 1,000 and Australia, and any of the ones who are sincerely practicing Buddhism fits them so perfectly, because this whole the outside. I mean, please change it. If you can get a key and walk out that door, and if you can't, this is the point, you know, this is the point. And my friends in prison get this. That's why I have such admiration for them, because they know. I mean, Arturo, he tried all the time to get his freedom, and he eventually got his freedom. He did all these courses. He did so much hard work internally, but he learned to accept his reality, not to be crazy and angry, because he realized, you know, that as he understood what Lama Zopa says, your prison is nothing in comparison with the inner prison of ordinary people. Now, this is heavy duty. Now, all I know is when I was a radical lefty political activist back in the 60s and 70s, if I'd heard those words, that I was working, you know, kind of supporting, you know, England, supporting the Black Panthers, supporting all these radical, I would have thought that was completely outrageous. How insulting to say that somebody who's suffering so badly in a prison, you know, because of the laws and racism. But somehow this is the point that Buddha's making. If we can listen to it, if we can hear it, it is liberating. It is liberating. Then whatever life, this is the point, and I'm talking, this is for ourselves, and then you can assume this then for others. So when you can learn to navigate your own mind, when you can, yes, your life is garbage, yes, the husband is horrible, yes, the racism is unbearable, yes, it's awful, the also work on our mind and steady the mind and get less attached and less angry and less depressed, because that's the point the Buddha makes, that we can change our mind. Then you become more profound, more liberated. I always remember Martin Luther King said, and you angry guy, but look at his activism. Look at, he never gave up. He said it's good to find fault. It's good to see fault in the world. Look at the suffering. Look at the racism. Look at the poverty. It's good to see that, but my computer goes crazy sometimes. Now I've got my iPad. Can you all see me? I don't like the iPad so much because I can't see you all, but never mind. Okay, there we go. Okay, good. So I think I clapped my hand very strong. I think that's what did it. The poor Wi-Fi got a shock. So what we're talking about is, you know, the Buddha's key point. Yes, there is the grosser level. Oh, yeah, that's right, Martin Luther King. This is so powerful, you know. You could tell he was not an angry guy. He wasn't tortured, but he was powerful. But he had patience, he had perseverance, he had compassion, and he had action. So this is the real point about changing our mind, you know. This is the thing that's hard to see, and this is all getting us to compassion. When we can see when bad things happen, because we don't have a reason why bad things happen. We don't know why bad things happen to us. Most people don't have a reason. We mostly just get angry. We get angry, we get freaked out, we get depressed, we get anxious. People lose their minds. And that's the point about my friends in prison. They could see there was no benefit in that. You just become paralyzed. You're hopeless. You can't change the outside world. You haven't got a key to get out of prison. Why lose your mind as well? Bad enough being in prison, why go crazy as well? Bad enough suffering from racism, sexism, garbage, terrorism, but why go crazy as well? That's the way to put it. It's tough. But, you know, the trouble is when we have the anger and the depression and the anxiety, we're so caught up in that. It's so painful. We can't imagine changing it. We can't imagine feeling any better. That's the point about Buddhist practice, you know, if you really put it down to earth. So when you can know that for yourself, then you can have compassion for others. not just the poverty, not just the racist, but this is going to be shocking now. You can even have compassion for the racists. And why should you? This is the point. This is the point. This is the point, and this takes time. Because when you know your own mind, you know the pain of anger, the pain of the jealousy, the pain of the depression, and you know you might not be a rapist, you might not be a terrorist, you might not go around stealing and lying and killing, but check your life, please. You've surely, like all of us, done something to harm others. You've been mean to some people. You've lied to some people. You cheated on a boyfriend. You took something that didn't belong to you. You have fights with people. Check that out. Now, what's in your mind that drives that? It is not love. It is not compassion. It is not patience. It is not joy. It's anger, depression, anxiety. So when you know that that's causing you pain, and when you know that's why you do anything that harms others, then you look at the world and go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Look at those wackos out there. Now, this is the other point about compassion. When we say you have compassion for somebody, I think we can find it only to innocent victims. Think about this. Think about this. As long as you're innocent, then I am prepared to have compassion for you. But if I see that you do anything, quote unquote, to deserve it, then you can suffer. So we're quite vindictive. We're quite heavy, you know. Unless, of course, it's your own beloved child. Like, let's say your beloved child is an alcoholic, and the alcoholic son is mean, he vomits in the soup, he's unkind to everybody, he cheats, he lies, he steals. You're about the only person, his mum, who has any compassion for him, because you can see he is suffering. This is the point. But when we don't even know our own suffering and we beat ourselves up for being angry and jealous, then how can you possibly have compassion for others? So this is really an evolutionary thing internally, you know, and it takes a lot of courage to do this. Then you can see everybody's gone crazy. Everybody's depressed, angry, jealous, crazy, deluded. Some people really deluded. And look at, that's why they harm others. So that doesn't, you see, that's the point when you know it's more than just poor sentimental, oh, he can't help it. When we say a person has compassion, oh, he can't help it, the poor thing, they can't help it. But that's not sentimental. You know, put the man in prison. Absolutely. Protect him from himself. You know, mums are brave enough sometimes that they actually call the police on their sons. I mean, maybe you would not in an awful society where where there's so much injustice. But compassion is courageous, but you can't have that level of compassion until you have it for yourself. So it's really a logic to it. We've got to think it through, though, you know. Because it's the hardest thing in the world to have compassion for people who are harmful. Of course it is. But so that means we've got to change what we mean by compassion, change the meaning of compassion. We usually think of it as something fairly sentimental, you know, or sort of gooey feeling, oh, look at the poor little doggies suffering. Look at those poor people suffering. Look at those poor Afghani, you know, what do you call, you know, suffering. Everybody's suffering, but we have to have innocent victims. This is our big problem. As soon as we discover, let's say, that one of those Afghani refugees maybe is a terrorist, we're not going to have compassion. We're going to chuck him in the ocean, you know? So, I mean, we've got to really analyze the assumptions we have quite deep inside us. And you can't have this level of compassion until you've done the work yourself. This is a fact. It's really a fact, you know? I mean, if you're not an alcoholic and you've got this alcoholic brother, let's say it's your brother, and you do love your brother, but he's a pain in the bum. He vomits in the soup. He makes mum and dad unhappy. He's causing all these problems. He lies, he steals. Nobody likes being around him. You've got no tolerance for him. And you keep bullying him to give up and go to AA, and he keeps falling off the wagon. You don't have any compassion at all. Why? Because he makes your life miserable. That's why we don't have compassion for troublemakers, because they've upset me. But when you understand, but it's only when you yourself have got some junkie and you've become an alcoholic and you've fallen flat on your face and then you pick yourself up, that's when you can have compassion for other people, because you've been there. And the Buddha's saying we're all in the same boat. We've all got some kind of attachment, anger, jealousy, depression, but we've got this arrogance and this hubris that, oh, look at all those bad people out there. Look at all those alcoholics. Look at all those evil people. That means you haven't seen your own mind at all. And that's why the first step has to be this wisdom wing, has to be you delving deep into your own mind, because we all have attachment, we all have anger, we all have depression, we all have jealousy. It's just a question of degree. Yeah, sure, some people are terrible, the harm they do. That's not an argument. There's no doubt about that. But we've got to start with ourselves, you know. Then we become a little bit more humble, first with ourselves, and begin to have some compassion for ourselves. This is so important because we love to beat ourselves up, you know. So much anger against ourselves, so much intolerance, so much impatience, you know. And this is where we have to do the work internally first. And then you become courageous. There's no question. You then become courageous. And then your compassion can grow. And then you can, you know, as Martin Luther King said, it's okay to, I don't think I even finished what he said. He said, it's okay to find fault. But then you say, what can I do to help? That's action. What can I do to help? And that's where, you see, it's true. We can see with the compassion we have now for the world, it is unbearable because you don't know how to help. You know, if you could rush off to Afghanistan now and fix it all up and make it lovely, please, I'll pay you for airfare. But we know we can't. Everywhere we turn, and because everything is so naked now, everywhere you turn, we're seeing the entire world on our iPads and our everything, you know. We can't escape from the suffering of the world. So it is unbearable. It is painful. It is overwhelming. And then we feel hopeless. So what is the attitude to have? Well, this is the way they talk about these bodhisattvas, you know, these incredible developed practitioners who've done the wisdom wing, who've worked on their minds and are really developed incredible compassion. And the key quality they have, and that's what you see in some of these marvelous political activists, you know. I mean, political activism is the compassion wing. Don't make it all sentimental. Don't make it all religious sounding. They never give up. That's the point. Look at Martin Luther King. I just think he's the most amazing example. He never gave up. He never gave up. He tried every way possible. I mean, look at the Dalai Lama. You can't get a better example than him, I swear to you. If you analyze and look at the suffering of that country, Tibet, since 1959, well, since 1950, when the Chinese started encroaching into the country, and eventually then the uprising in 1959, and then hundreds of thousands of Tibetans all escaped, you know, and the Dalai Lama included. So since that time, since you hear about the Dalai Lama, he turned 16. He was appointed the boss of Tibet because, you know, the Dalai Lama was there. So they had a two-pronged parliament. I don't know what they call it, the parliament, but like, you know, Congress. The politicians, the legislators. They had a monk, not a nun, of course, a monk and a lay person. That's how they used to be, you know. So the Dalai Lama was like the boss as far as they were concerned. So when he was 16 years old, he took over, you know, he took over running Tibet right in the midst of this nightmare. He was born in 1935, so that's 45, 55, 1956. In the midst of this chaos, a 16-year-old boy, he became the boss of Tibet. Well, if you look at his life since 1956, and it's now nearly 70 years, isn't it? Nearly 70 years, you can tell he has never given up for 1 second, working diplomatically, socially, spiritually, scientifically, religiously, politically, in every way. He never stops trying to find ways to make it better in Tibet. Now, if that's not enthusiasm, I don't know what is. And anybody who sees the man, you know, you can tell he's a funny, wonderful, perky, happy person. So this should blow our minds if you analyze the suffering that Tibet is experiencing and continues to experience at the hands of the Chinese communists. You know, they've ripped the country to pieces. There's poverty and starvation. Never before there was, but now there is because of the greed and everything. Every mineral in the whole country's been ripped the guts out of the country. The wild animals are dying. I mean, the most terrible suffering in every way for every being in Tibet. It's destroyed, you know. But he never gives up. He never gives up. And that's the point about what enthusiasm means. The world is tough. Our lives are difficult. Things come. And that's why doing the work internally first, what that does is give you courage and give you confidence and gives you perseverance to deal with your own garbage. Then you can help others. Because the point is, the world is full of suffering. And if you look at the history, it seems to have never stopped. And if you don't cross your fingers for it to stop soon, then you've got to be enthusiastic. You've got to have enthusiasm. You've got to have courage, just for yourself, then for others. Because you're the beneficiary of that, you know, because life is tough. And this is the struggle. This is the tragedy of the world. I mean, when I hear about young people killing themselves, it's unbearable. I know one mother who knows several parents who have lost their children to suicide, you know, because we become overwhelmed. We don't understand why suffering is. We don't know what to do about it. And we don't know our own minds and know that we can change our minds. That's the tragedy. That's the tragedy, you know. So you darling people, I don't know, I've said a few words. How long have I talked? Oh, well, you've all gone again. What happened to you? I've just lost you. I just lost you. Wait a minute.
We're here. Your
I know you
visual's
are.
gone.
I can imagine you are, but I kind of lose you. It's so strange. I touch wrong things and then something happens. Let me see what's going on. Hang on a minute. God, what's happened?
Might just be.
Here I go. I'm back
yeah,
again.
There
So
you go.
I'm okay. So listen, honey, children, listen, darlings. It's only 35 minutes I've been talking. I'm very sorry. Although I talk 3 times the pace, so it's more like an hour and a half. So we should finish now. But I'm joking. So now you have to ask me some questions. Let's have conversation now. Based upon what I've said, now let's put, meat on the bones and have discussion. Come on, ask me some questions, dear people. Anything at all. Somebody, something. Think of something, Jack, and get the ball rolling. That's the main thing. Get the ball rolling,
What's your suggestion for bringing somebody to the path to start?
Matthew, it's a bit like you can bring a horse to water, you can't make him drink. We know that, don't we? So, it's a bit like, let's say you've been an alcoholic and then you've discovered AA and you know how marvelous it is. We can often get a bit overexcited and try and drag every alcoholic off the street into the AA meetings. But, the person has got to want it. That's where compassion, Matthew, is the starting point. But like Dalai Lama says, compassion's not enough. You've got to have wisdom, which really means it's common sense. You've got to know if your mate down the road is still an alcoholic, he doesn't want to know about boring old AA. So you just love him for who he is. And then you can check it out. And then maybe one day he might be ready. So you've got to use wisdom, use skill, Don't push, can't push. We know you can bring a horse to water, but we know we can't make him drink. And we know there's nothing more infuriating than someone else, even just pushing us to see their latest movie because they loved it. They think you have to love it too. We know that's horrible, So be wise. Be a good example. Actually, that's the best way. Be example, Then people can't deny that experience. It's a good point, Matthew. What else, darling people? Anything else? Thank you. Anything else? Any old questions? Nothing. You people, Barbara, Lou, who's here? I'm just checking everybody. Now I can see. Okay. So, okay. So let's just say, you I think you're hearing these words, you think, yeah, I understand that I harm people because of my own depression and jealousy. So and anger, that's why other people harm people. So how would it look? How would it look having compassion for somebody? And what would be the action? This is the thing. What would be the action? Well, start with your closest friends, I'd say. Like Matthew's point. Let's just say, he didn't say alcoholic, I said alcoholic. But let's just use that as an analogy. Any kind of suffering, and you start to work on yours, and you've got methods, and they work. So that means you've got some compassion for yourself. And then, of course, you suddenly see alcoholics everywhere. And you just wish they could understand that AA is perfect. And this is where the trouble is. You'd run around with your placards, being a political activist. They'll kill you. Go away, mind your own business. You can't do that. So compassion would be, you'd see others. Okay, the first point is this. Often I said before, we've got this hubris, if we don't have any awareness of our own mind, we're not looking into our mind. We don't own our negativity. We're always, the world is like this. We love to find fault. Half the time we're with groups of people, where most of the time we're just talking about the lousy politicians, these horrible people, these people, those people down the road. We love to find fault. We are very articulate when it comes to pointing out groups, countries, politicians, families, faults. And maybe you're right about it. You might be right about it. But one of the key things is when you start to work on your own mind, one of the really powerful practices, I find this so helpful, Let's say I'm into reading all the news. I read all my different newspapers. I've got about 6 different newspapers. I read the New York Times, the Financial Times, the Economist. I read the Atlantic, the magazine. I read the Washington Post. What else do I read? The Financial Times, I said that. And I also read Vanity Fair and Vogue. Don't get shocked. I love reading stories and people and everything. So I read lots about people. So one of the key things, we're always finding fault. Look at that Mr. Trump, if you don't like Mr. Trump, Look at those people, look at this. You never endingly are exhaustingly angry. We're always doing this analysis of everybody bad in the world. Now, you might be right, but look how it exhausts you. It doesn't mean you're naive and don't see it. But the key practice, I find this pretty profound, and you listen. It's really hard. The wisdom wing approach is this. If I'm reading the papers and I read the latest things about Afghanistan, all the dramas, everybody's different opinions, then the thing is to look at the suffering that people are experiencing, and then look at the politicians who you think are horrible, and you can acknowledge it, but then you kind of go back into yourself and you'll go, well, there's anger, there's jealousy, there's arrogance, there's hubris. And then you go, I recognize that. I can't tell you how profound this is. Instead of just being this innocent, this person who's so perfect, pointing out faults everywhere else, that just separates you from the world, But at least, I know, okay, in my case, I didn't particularly like Mr. Trump. I thought his policies were kind of weird. I thought he was a kind of weird dude. He might be a good man. I don't know, but I just didn't say I didn't like his politics. So then it's easy to find fault in Mr. Trump, just like because he seems to have two extreme groups, people who absolutely worship the ground he walks on and people who absolutely loathe him. And there are some people like that. So let's just say you're one of the people who doesn't like him. Then the thing for me, when I'm reading the news about Mr. Trump, and you don't read about Mr. Trump anymore, but just say when it was, then I could go, well, there's lying, there's stealing, there's hubris, there's arrogance. But then instead of, oh, how dare he be like that, I would say to myself, thank you, Mr. Trump, for showing me how not to be. Thank you for showing me anger. Thank you. It sounds kind of corny, but this is how you get to see your own mind. Then you stay stable, and then you can begin to have compassion. Otherwise, you're just separate from the world all the time, pointing out fault, constantly finding fault. And that's when I was a political activist, a radical political activist, a serious political activist, I tell you, full on, 100%. I spent my entire life articulating all the dramas of the world. I thought I was compassionate, but half the time my compassion was completely polluted by frustration and anger, And that's the trouble with our compassion now. We have compassion for one person, and then immediately we find the person to be angry with. And that's the trouble with our compassion at the moment. We cut it down, we smash it, we destroy it with anger. Now, that doesn't mean, like Mr. Trump said, not Mr. Trump, what's his name? I just said before, Martin Luther King. His point was profound. He didn't say, you see, we think anger means finding fault. No, finding fault is the truth. There is racism. That's not anger. That's a fact. But anger is on top of it. And that's the piece that is the destructive part. And that's what we have to find, that is distinguished between anger, which is this enraged emotion that's rooted in my attachment, not getting what it wants, that I dump on top of the finding fault. But you don't throw out finding fault. That's intelligence to see what's wrong. But then you say, just like Martin Luther King said, then you say, what can I do to help? What can I do to fix it? That's the difference. That's the difference. And we have to distinguish in our mind then between anger and between simply finding fault. It's very, very different. And when you get that difference, it's a revelation, I tell you. So come on, ask me some more questions. Please, please ask me some questions. Any old point, bring something up, anything you like. Yes, Shankar.
Well, a lot of times I think I'm trying to help, but I actually make things worse.
Okay, why is that?
Well, that's what I'm asking. How do I know what to do?
It's a powerful point. This is the wisdom wing. I don't mean it's a very general statement. The wisdom wing. It just means. Okay. Let's just say you got a kid. If you're a parent, I think especially for a parent, because there's so much. Okay. The technical explanation for why it's difficult to help another person and to know what to do is simply, and this is the Buddhist view, as you know very well, is because it's got lots of attachment, lots of anger, lots of vested interest. So if you're a really, a parent who's got a naughty child, and you've got lots of attachment to this child, and they make you crazy, you get angry easily every second minute, and that's very typical for parents, then you have no wisdom whatsoever. Because half the time you're coming from, when you try to discipline the child, you think you're being kind of compassionate, but you're coming from your own frustration and your own anger, so you make a complete mess. That's one example. I'm not sure you're talking about that one. That's one example. So as soon as we've got our own stuff caught up in it and we can't see. So, let's just say you've got it. Or let's just say another example of a person, this is Matthew's point. My point to Matthew, let's say an alcoholic brother or something. You love your brother. That's fantastic. You have compassion for your brother, no question. But it's your attachment. This is what's so hard. Attachment, as we know, is this emotional hunger, this junkie in us that only wants the nice things. It can't cope with problems. So your alcoholic brother is a great big problem to you. He does not do what your attachment wants. So therefore there's anger there. But we can, the love we have for him is, and the compassion are polluted by the attachment. And so we rush in like fools and start giving advice. But he doesn't want our advice. He's not ready for it. And we don't realize we're coming from attachment. I mean, the technical reason we don't know how to help another person is because of our attachment and our delusions. They blind us. So, I mean, we have to see that. Or, you know, or like, let's say the other big problem because of attachment, when somebody asks advice, somebody wants emotional advice, we have this instinctive impulse to try to solve their problem. But actually, sometimes the best thing is just to give them love and give them a hug and listen to their problem and let them talk and say, I understand, I know how you feel, I do understand, I really do, and you really love the person. Because sometimes all we do is blurt out all this advice, do this and do that, and why don't you, because we have this impulse to think we've got to make the problem go away. That's often the problem. We stick our nose in where it doesn't belong. So every second person, that alcoholic, has every person telling them what to do, you know? And there's nothing more infuriating. I don't know, do any of these answers make sense, Shankar? So sometimes the best, especially if you're a parent, just let your child talk to them, look at them with love, empower them. I'm sure you've got the wisdom. You'll make the right decision. Don't you worry about it. But we have this impulse to give them all the answers. And then you paralyze a person. Sometimes it's useful to give an answer, but sometimes we have, and this is because of attachment, we feel compelled to make the problem go away. And that's our problem, not theirs. So it's just to be there to support them. We know ourselves as nothing more marvelous than a friend who loves us for who we are and isn't all the time trying to fix us. That's the best friend in the planet, I tell you. What else, people? Anything else, people? Questions? Points? Nobody's saying anything to me. Come on, you people, talk to me. Barbara, you've got points always. Nothing, Barbara? I heard a voice. Who was it? Cassia, hello, sweetheart. Happy to see you. I've seen you a bit lately. Happy to see you, darling. You got any questions? No? Okay. Anybody else got questions?
I think Skylar did. I saw her unmute.
Oh, God, the sound is not so good. Are you all hearing me properly? Don't drip. Are you hearing me properly? So who was talking then? Skylar. Talk to me, sweetheart.
I'm Skylar. Hi.
Yes, happy to see you.
Happy to see you too. I watched you lots of times on YouTube. Anyway, how do you politely disengage from a heated conversation when the person won't really let you disengage?
You mean you're arguing about something, or they're bossing you? I mean, what's more the scenario? It's just it's a fight. It's a close friend. Is it I mean, say a bit more context.
A conversation that got heated, and I tried to kind of, withdraw and stop the conversation because I knew it was getting too emotional.
Yes. Sure.
And, I was not allowed to.
Okay, is this just for more context? I'm not trying to be too personal. Is it a very close person, or like family, or is it just your next door neighbor or something? Family. A close person. Darling, I think when you say I wasn't allowed to, that's a bit like they're imprisoning you, but maybe that's where Pat's pointing out, Skylar, we have to learn to have the courage to know that you can turn your back and walk out the door. But you say I wasn't allowed to. I mean, they didn't have, cufflinks on you. They didn't have they weren't imprisoning you. And that's often the courage we need to develop, Skylar. Because you just have to say, I can't handle this. I have to stop now. Not in a passive aggressive way, not in an angry way, blaming them. I'm not blaming you, but I can't cope with this. So I really need to stop now, if you don't mind, and walk out the door. What do you think of that? What is it in you that prevents you from doing that, do you think? Because you said I wasn't allowed to.
We live together.
Oh, this gets more difficult. Well, can't you go to the toilet or something? They followed you out the door or something, this person?
Yeah.
I know it's not easy. Honey child. It's not easy. But you've got to look at what I'm saying, and perhaps the other lesson is The other big learning for next time is stop it sooner. Do you understand? Because it's quite difficult when you're up close that much, you know. But stop, and because it easily can be, it's easily blaming the other person too. But somehow you got, I mean, whatever, you got to risk doing whatever you have to do, you know, just to, because if you can't cope with it, it makes sense. It's not that easy, but you know what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying. Is it is it a familiar occurrence?
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, then something that's pretty big for you to learn then. What is it you think you need to learn yourself? What do you think you need to learn from this? Forget the other person. You know, what do you think? I mean, this is really personal, Skylar, but you're so amazing to say it. And this is such a common thing. So what do you think you need to learn about this type of thing? Or what happened?
More of, I guess where my point of no return would be.
I'm sorry, I'm just getting my light back on. Sorry, start again. What? Say it again.
I think, I mean, I honestly need to learn a lot. But I'm right now, I guess, trying to focus on where is that point of no return? Like where should I really be firm and, you know, within my mind, like I'm playing it back in my head and I'm like, okay, this is what I could have done here.
Yeah,
this is done there. And I'm trying to, you know, remember how the feelings were and how they just started. And it's like both sides, we went into the past and it's like, no, like that's done and over with. And
I understand. So from your side, then okay, I'm not trying to be too personal. You can say, but I have to ask it because this is all part of the scenario. I mean, are you in the house? You're in your home right now.
Yes.
And this person's in another room right at this moment.
I believe she's gone.
Okay. So then you have to, I mean, you want to say more? I mean, is it mother-daughter?
Mother-daughter, yes.
Okay, darling, my God almighty, mother-daughter is the most intense relationship on the planet. So, honey child, you're probably the mother or you're the daughter? Are you the mother or the...
In this life, I am the daughter.
Okay, you're the daughter. So, darling child, this is intense. Okay, now we understand. Now we understand, darling. So this is something huge for you that demands also compassion, not just patience on your part and a lot of digging inside, but you've got to, I mean, if it's your mother and you're living in the same house as your mother, for whatever reason, darling girl, you've got a lot of inner work to do. And you've got to really, because it's your mum, she might be, I mean, I'm not even describing, you know your mother, but you've got to stop, absolutely, you've got to make a decision to stop having these conversations. You've got to learn to, you've got masses of inner work to do, Skylar. You cannot expect her to be different. You have to learn to shut your mouth, Skylar. I swear to you, this is like the first level of practice. The very first level in Buddhism is you control the servants of the mind. You control your body and you control your speech. And then you can begin to control your mind, Skylar. But because it's your mummy, which is a red rag to a bloody bull, we know that with our mummies, then you have got such a difficult job. But you've got to learn to control your mouth and learn, I mean, to sacrifice. I mean, you choose to live there, I presume, and you choose to have her there. So, darling girl, it's amazing that you're doing that. You've got to get your own space. You've got to make sure you have your own space, and you've got to practice in your own mind every day to shut your mouth. Not be passive aggressive, but don't even go there. Don't even begin to have conversations because your poor darling mummy, her attachment is so upset. She's probably resentful and hurt and miserable, and that it will never stop. That's my advice. What do you think, sweetheart?
I have been taught prior kind of like going the opposite way, like you dissolve the emotions into emptiness and
that's wonderful. That's good. You're wonderful if you can.
Inside out. And then someone else was like, oh, well, that's suppressing the emotions.
No, it's not. It's
so
good. It's wonderful.
What's the difference between dissolving them into emptiness or suppressing?
Well, you got to learn that difference. But because I mean, basically, it's because it's your mummy. You know, I mean, if we can have brave enough, you've got to just. I mean, you know, we're all old. I bet your mummy's older than you. So that means she's going to die soon, and you're going to don't want to have any regrets. You have to learn to, when you're with your mummy, you got to give her your time. Know it's that period. You've got to have your own life. You've got your own life, your own space, or you do your own things, or you're with your mother all day.
Pretty much own space.
Okay, that's good then. So
Yeah.
then when you are going to be with her, you've got to make a strong decision. I've got 1 hour and I'm going to give it to my mum. You've got to really learn to be there for your mother. Let her say what she wants. Let her be what she is. This is very hard when it's a mother. And just love her for who she is, darling. All I can say is that. Love her for who she is and try to just be, you know, give her that time when you're there. Make a decision and shut the mouth. Because like you said, it's the pain. She's coming from this painful place, all her projections about you, probably the past, like you said, you know. Am I right?
Yes. And it's been amazing because she is such a good mirror. Like I've learned so, and I'm still trying to learn, obviously, you know, life progress. But yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, I'm really, I'm learning so much.
Good, darling. Just keep moving, girl. And just, I think once you shut your mouth, then there's nothing to regret. You know, honestly, once the words are out, the damage is done. And when a person is suffering, every tiny negative word you say, she will take it like a sword and put it into her heart, and she will never forget it. And it will become back to you. So learn as much as you can, as my suggestion. Try, do one day at a time. Tonight, you go to bed and you make a vow. Tomorrow, I'm going to shut my mouth. Try it out. Make a firm decision tonight before you go to sleep. And then in the morning, remember your decision. I think you'll see a difference if you can shut your mouth. I promise you. What do you think?
Would it be considered rude to shut my mouth? I need to find a polite way to...
What do you mean by that, though, darling? Why is it rude? What do you mean? In what situation would it be rude? I mean, you say it when you say a good word. When would a fight start? How do these fights start? What would happen? This last fight, what started it?
This last... her dog passed away a couple of weeks ago, and she wanted to get a new one right away. And I asked her if she could wait. I found out my dog is got severe arthritis, and so I told her, you know, I'm worried about my dog, and it just escalated from there on both sides. And I went for a walk, and she's texting me, and yeah, I shouldn't have been texting her or even reading them, but then it's like if I stop responding to her, then I get accused of ignoring her.
I know, darling. I don't care what she accuses you of. You've got to try. What I'm getting at is you've got to break the pattern. You've got to try and break the pattern. And that doesn't mean your mother will be easy with it. It doesn't mean it's like you're in a tennis match and you've got to play different tennis. She'll get mad, even madder at you, but you've got to realize you've got to change the dynamic, because it will never end. These fights will never end. So you can answer differently. Just let her be angry. Let her be angry with you. Let her feel it's insulted, but try not to just, mummy, I love you, but it's just difficult or something, and be quiet. I don't mean be passive aggressive. You've got to try and change the dynamic, Skylar, because it will never end going like this. Never end, darling. You'll go mad.
The people in prison, how did they, I mean, they had to have been egged on for fights and everything. How did they?
I like living in hell, constant fights.
Yeah.
But that's where they start to learn to practice. I mean, my friends who were in the gangs, they gave up the gangs. They had to make a formal decision and write to the boss gangster and say, we're giving up the gangs, you know? Darling, I think it's the mouth. You know, I know what you're saying. I can imagine it. It's like a nightmare. But you got to realize you're in control. You've got to change the dynamic of the whole relationship. You have to try and do that. And because, you know, once the words are out, you know that. And let her be mad. Let her accuse you whatever she likes. Don't be passive aggressive. Just tell her, Mum, I love you, but I don't want to fight. I love you, Mum, but I don't want to fight. And let her do what she wants. Let her be furious with you. It doesn't matter, darling, Skylar. Can you hear that part? Let her be that, because whatever you do, she's going to get angry with you. If you fight, she'll be angry. And if you don't fight, she'll be angry. So at least you don't have to have words to be the fuel. And take as much space as you like. And just, Mum, I love you, but I don't want to fight. I love you, Mum. Say those words, but I don't want to fight. That's it. And walk out the door. I don't know what else to say to you. Have courage, Skylar. Realize that you're the one who's got to change the dynamic. You can't expect your mother to do that. You have to be the one to change the whole dynamic, because you're living in this house. She's in the house with you. So this is your choice, and it's very courageous of you. And slowly, you know, be brave, darling. Thank you, Skylar. So kind. Thank you so much, darling. What else, people? So this is forget about having compassion for suffering people in the world. I mean, this is where the trouble is, in the house, you know, it's right there with your mummy, your daddy, your kids, and your husband. That's where that's where the work is, you know. This is where the real hard work is. My God. Yes, my dear Samia, go and talk to me. She's in Australia.
I am. Hi, everyone.
Hello, sweetheart.
Wonderful to listen to all of that. And I've been thinking lately and trying to act on understanding that I can't keep my mouth quiet when I see things that I know are directly harmful.
Yes, sure.
To other people.
Yes.
And I'm realizing that and I have a question about this. I think I'm on a little bit of the right track, maybe, in that I do it. I've developed a bit of a bad habit of getting quite angry in it because I'm getting older and I'm getting tired of people being idiots, including myself.
Exactly, darling. Yes, exactly.
But I feel like I still need to do it and accept that there'll be suffering associated with doing that.
Yes, yes.
But there'll also be suffering in not doing
it, precisely. So this is another discussion, Samia. So Matthew's part, sometimes you just got to be wise. Skylar's one with a mum, I think she's got no choice. Otherwise it's a nightmare, you know, because she's not trying to change her mother. She can't change her mother. She's got to change the dynamic. But with, you know, with political activity and suffering in the world, I think part of our big problem is we are too afraid to say something because we all want to be loved. So to have the courage to speak out is also good. I mean, look at Martin Luther King. You can't say he didn't speak out. He caused unbelievable trouble in the country because he didn't be silent. So it's each dynamic, each scenario is different, you know. So when you're doing political activity, it's what I can see is really important to know if it's coming just from anger, frustration, fury, and wanting to harm the others, or whether it's coming from genuine compassion because you're trying to make the world a better place. I mean, Martin Luther King caused untold problems. You know, at the time, I remember when I was a radical lefty, I loved Malcolm X because I loved his style better, you know, and I thought Martin Luther King was a wimp. But now I can see his incredible courage. He was just the same. He never gave up. He stuck his head out. He caused problems. He never took no for an answer. That's courage, but it's got to come from a good place. Otherwise, you'll destroy yourself and others.
Yeah, I think what I'm realizing in exactly that, it's that seeing that harm is going to happen if I don't say something. Knowing that may still have no effect whatsoever.
No, precisely, exactly. But you can always try, but learn from that. So have no expectations that the world will change overnight. So that's the biggest point. But still act, and you could bring some benefit, but don't have any expectations of any benefit. That's the point too.
Exactly, and also that the likelihood is I'll be unpopular.
No, also that. So we've got to weigh it up. Because the fact is, I mean, you've got to weigh it up, because sometimes if you, let's say, especially if you're working politically, you need to be wise because you want to keep relationships. Otherwise, if you close every door and nobody likes you anymore, you know what it's like with troublemaking, you know, radical activists. Everybody hates them. Then you're not beneficial to anybody. So it's a fine balance between having the courage to stand up and also to be the troublemaker if you have to be. So you've got to, and that, especially if it's political activity, you've got to accept that. You know,
I think,
and this is the other point also, when it's one-on-one, it's a bit different, because one-on-one, like Matthew's point, if a person isn't ready to hear what you have to say, if a one person, there's no benefit in saying it. But if it's going to be political statements, then some people will hear it, and that's different, you know.
I think the add-on would be consistently, no matter if there's a difference in view, I've taken to reminding myself to be kind and to wish kindness for the other
there you go.
people.
That's the one.
And even saying it, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
that's a really good point.
A context, maybe, just because then you could perhaps talk to it a little bit more if people are interested in this direction.
What's that?
Is, well, you know, there's many, but one that's just happened recently, and it'll have a context for people in other countries because we're all dealing with it, is of course with COVID. And for a good year, Australia was ahead of the rest of the world in being able to keep cases at bay by lockdowns, what we call lockdowns, which I think is an interesting term. They should call it just stay safe.
Right,
home.
exactly. There
They
you
might
go.
have got a better
exactly.
result.
Lockdown. Right.
Like
I know.
stay safe home would have been so much better.
So what's the topic now? What's happening in Australia now?
So for a good year, I've watched it because I have so many friends in America and in First Nations communities and have watched it decimate people.
Yes.
You know, I'm a scientist, have a background in health and epidemiology, taught at medical schools, was presenting evidence from First Nations people about, you know, the impact. And we have just now started to have cases where out of control as well, and they're impacting Aboriginal communities the hardest.
Exactly.
And so we've had a year where things could have been prepared, a year where the government could have acted, a year where also people could have been getting vaccinated.
Sure.
And
so what's the topic for you now? What is the action that you think is necessary now that's problematic? What are you getting?
So the problem that we're dealing, and I'm sure it's happening everywhere, is the conspiracy theorist, you know, getting the vaccines, you know, got 5G chips in it and I'll be able to run my iPhone off it.
So, but how is that a problem for you at the moment? What is that? How is that a topic to be discussed? I don't get it.
Well, because of engaging with people who are very, very of that end.
I've got that views. No, I know that would be difficult. Yeah. When you've got very extreme views, there's nothing much we can do. We've got really extreme views with people literally with fantasies, making up conspiracy theories. I think there's very little you can do. You can't convince anybody. I don't think there's anything you can do. If you're having one-on-one conversations, I can't imagine. But I mean, I don't know how that's, and that's where I think it's the wisdom. The answer is on a simple level, like whether it's Matthew's point or Skylar, you've got to have enough wisdom to know that the words you will say will be useful. If it's one-on-one, I remember talking to one white supremacist once, and I was just plain fascinated to see what his mind worked like. I wasn't even arguing with him. I wasn't even pretending to argue. I wanted to understand his mind. So I asked him all the questions and I just let him talk. Sometimes that's all you can do with somebody. Another person, if you've got an open mind, you can say other things. But if you're politically active and you have to write articles, then you're going to be speaking to millions of people, thousands of people. Then it's different. I don't know what else to say besides that. You get my point?
Yeah. No, I think it's just it's difficult to accept that people are going to suffer when they could do something to avoid that.
What do you mean it's difficult
suffering?
To accept? It's reality. What do you mean by that? What's the action that you can do? Always the question has to, when you say that, the question then is, what can I do to fix it? So that's the answer. So what do you think the solution is?
Well, if I take this particular community that I'm thinking of, they don't have water, they don't have food.
Good, so what's the solution? What's your solution?
So the solution is that we've been doing fundraising and getting food and trying to get medical supplies there.
Okay, so you're doing it. That's the main thing. But
the hard part to accept is that there's people in those communities that won't be and aren't doing what will keep themselves and other people safe.
That's where your practice comes in. Accepting that people are stupid with deluded views, and you have to have the courage to say it's difficult. That's what anger is, and that's what never giving up means. That's it, honey child. Never give up. Keep doing what you're doing. And knowing that people have got stubborn, stupid minds. What can we do? When you know your stubborn, stupid mind, then you can understand theirs.
I know I was going to say that. I know I've got a stubborn, stupid mind.
That's the one, darling. I swear to you, that's it. And just never give up. Just keep doing it, like the Dalai Lama. This method doesn't work, try another one. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. So good, Samia. Thank you, darling. What else, people? What else is there? How are we going for time? 20 minutes. Come on, talk to me.
So how can we work with our minds when we have thoughts that bother us?
That's like saying, how can I learn to ride a bike when I can't ride a bike? That's why you're learning to ride a bike. That's the point. I mean, of course, we've got thoughts that disturb us. That's what Buddha has understood, that our minds are uncontrolled. That's just the nature of the universe. Join the universe, people. And Buddha's techniques are methods to learn to first control the servants of the mind, which is our body and speech, which is the discussion with Skylar. Then to learn to slowly, by using meditation techniques, to get some kind of focus, slowly, and then learn throughout the day, every day, to listen to the thoughts, to label what they are, and to slowly change the thoughts. That's what practice is. I don't know what else to say, because I didn't understand the question properly. That is exactly what practice is. But with no expectations, you're going to become a saint overnight. It's hard work, because these thoughts go ever more deep, they're very uncontrolled, they go very subtle. There's levels and levels and levels of them. So we're going to have long-term patience. And this is the full-on job of the so-called wisdom wing. It's a full-on job, never ending.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me like this?
I can hear you a bit better, darling. Yes. Did you hear my answer?
I did. Yeah. So someone I know recently died, and what I've been, it bothered me because, they died, and of course you have thoughts thinking of them, but I would find myself waking up in the morning and just my mind really, I just wanted to rip every thought out of my head. So of course it was just like, it was an old relationship,
yes.
A past boyfriend, and not someone that I was very close to. When I was with them, it was very much me. I was younger. I was chasing after them. It was not me being myself, but, and so then I found like I was really angry at myself. Why did I even know them? Why did I even spend time with them? Like, this is so stupid. I don't even want to think about them. But really, I know that it's because it's hard for me to go deep with death. Sometimes it scares me.
Just a minute. Wait. Wait. So this ex-boyfriend died. But you haven't really told me what kind of thoughts were you having since they died? Were they angry thoughts, resentful thoughts, jealous thoughts? What were they? Label them.
No, not just memories. Just memories.
What do you mean by memories? Memories are thoughts, darling.
Just
memories are conversations in your head. So what was the conversation saying? Were you angry with yourself? I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean, darling?
I guess just like the death is sometimes like disturbing for me. So I found myself thinking, like, wondering how they were when they died, and like all of those things kind of playing along the way. And then, I guess angry at myself, wondering why I wasted my time with this person. And now my mind is preoccupied with them. So at the moment,
so you mean, how long ago was the relationship?
Oh, like 3.5 years.
So how long ago was it? When did it stop?
Like 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
3 years ago.
So you're angry, but I mean, the person's dead.
Right.
So it's bringing up thoughts in you about yourself. Well, that's good. So look at your mind, look at your anger, and learn from it. But I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's kind of curious. It's fascinating what you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you work on your mind, don't you? You're a little Buddhist, aren't you?
Yeah, I try. And then sometimes I try to escape my mind,
We all do. We can't bear the pain, can we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Had you thought to do any prayers for him and for his benefit?
Very much. Yep, very much. Medicine Buddha and dedicating daily practice.
Good, darling.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and shared with
the key one is that it seems to me that this is an opportunity. This man has been a trigger for you to see your mind. So see your anger, see your attachment, see your frustration, learn about your mind, but then you've got to make a decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of like if you're analyzing how bad you ride the bike, it's reminded you of how bad you ride the bike, then you've got to start making some decisions to ride the bike properly. Don't just keep finding fault in yourself. So learn about this, learn about that relationship, learn about your own mind. Then it becomes a learning experience. That's what practice is. Practice is a learning experience. You've just been playing tennis, you made a complete disaster, and you're thinking about it. So to go over and over and over in your head about all the bad shots that you did, you've got to know the bad shots, but then you make a decision to change. That's what practice is, Kassia.
So how do you let go of like the self-defeating, these crappy
You
thoughts?
argue with them. You see them as,
Okay.
I mean, self-defeating is the delusion. So you just had a tennis match and all you do is say, I did that backhand bad, I did the forehand bad, I did this bad, I did that bad. You might have done it bad, but then what's your decision? Well, I'd better learn from this experience and see if I can do it well. That's what practice is, sweetheart. We've got to first see the problem, then make a decision to change. In other words, instead of swimming in the misery and over continually telling yourself how bad you are, that will destroy you. Yes, so see your faults, recognize them, and this is what the Buddhist practice is. You know that they don't define you, but it's good to see them, but you don't just keep swimming in them. You then make a decision. Okay, I'm learning about my mind. I've learned about my attachment, learning about my anger. Maybe I wasted my life, but this is who I am. This is what I did. Now I'm going to move forward. So some practical, skillful approaches to keep moving and keep practicing and keep growing your marvelous potential and point your own potential out to you. I mean, I don't know what else to say, darling. This is just, it's practical, you know.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. Thank you.
That's what practice is, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Don't just run away. Don't run away from them. Can't do that because they're going to keep popping up.
Right.
Until we deal with them, they're going to keep popping up, sweetheart. So use this as an opportunity. Thank him for showing you your mind. His dying has reminded you of him. And now it's reminding you of you. So learn from it. But keep, and that's why all the time we've got to see our faults, but you've got to see your potential. If you don't see your potential as a tennis player, you will collapse and die. You've got to see, okay, I will learn from these mistakes. And you have to confront them, not just run away from them, Cassia.
Right.
But don't exaggerate them. They don't define you, darling.
Okay.
Remember that.
Okay.
Do you understand?
I do. Yes.
Good, sweetheart. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What else, people? What else is there? Interesting conversations. Well, us human beings. What else, darlings? Any other points? We've got 10 minutes. Let's make the most of our 10 minutes.
Hi, Rabina.
Who's that?
It's Catherine.
Who's talking to you? Hello, Catherine. Oh, sweetheart.
Hi.
Yes, my dear friend, Catherine.
So this kind of follows on with the last few questions earlier. So the last week, especially, I've been feeling particularly like apocalyptic, like like this impending,
Yes.
doom and darkness and people suck and, oh my God. And so today I was out walking and it's just like, okay, I need to do something with this. I need to, what can I do to learn from this or work with this, make it useful for me. And so I was thinking, it's like, okay, well, from the attachment, clearly my attachment's not getting what it wants.
Yes, that's right, exactly.
But then I kind of get stuck and I'm not really sure where do I go from there? Like what do I focus on in particular with this?
So you mean all the business with COVID and all the lockdowns and all the people dying or what? What's
Well,
the thing that's triggering this?
just like stupidity, people are stupid, like we said, a few minutes ago, and just and all this stuff in Texas and all, all this
listen. But this is the point, honey child. So this is to try and summarize. I know it sounds almost easy, but it's not. But the summary, if we can take all this path, which you are so familiar with, and this is why the two wings is not a joke. It's a powerful way to package it all. So the wisdom wing point of view, what's happening is this: you're seeing the world. Okay, so there's two approaches to it, the wisdom wing approach and the compassion approach. So if we're taking the compassion approach and you're seeing all the stupidity and all the dramas and the foolish people and the conspiracy theorists and the rubbish and the nonsense, then you think, look at the world, unbelievable suffering, all these poor people, what can I do to help? That's the compassion one. But the first one, honey child, is, which is the one you've got to do, you see all this stuff and then you go, this is what I'm trying to say, you've got to not just stand here and be separate and point to these idiots out there, because that's the hubris we've all got, like as if you're a saint. You've got to find a way to see the world and go, well, I know that there's conspiracy theory, paranoia, there's jealousy, there's anger, there's resentment, there's foolishness, there's arrogance. I recognize that. So thank you for showing me how to pull my finger out and do the work and get back on, work on your mind. That's the answer, Pethel. Work on your mind, see it out there, and you know you've got every one of those. So thank you for showing me how not to be. I'm going to keep focusing on my mind and get down and do my daily practice, work on my attachment, work on my anger, work on my jealousy, so I can see it in myself and get rid of that, so then I can have compassion and do what I can, one baby step at a time. If you're going to be a politician and affect millions of people, then do it. If you're going to help one person, then do that. I mean, because you know, that's the whole point. The world is naked to us. Every single day we're going to see and hear all about it. So they're going to show you delusions and you go, I understand that. I've got those delusions too. And if you don't have that connectedness with others, you'll just get angry and resentful. You've got to, and that brings the compassion. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's got attachment and conspiracy theories and rage and paranoia. It mightn't be as bad as, it might be worse than ours, but you recognize it and you realize that I've got to keep working on it, and then I can be useful to others. And then you keep yourself steady, because the world could easily get a lot worse. So we've got to keep steady.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to keep practical and steady, darling. But if we get thrown by it, if you start getting thrown by it and overwhelmed by it, it will cause you to go crazy. This is why my friends in prison are such great examples. They're living in this utter hell, nightmarish environment. So they had no choice but to work on their own mind and to stay steady. This is why the wisdom wing has to come first, Catherine. Which is, and why you're getting upset is because your attachment not getting what it wants, and that's anger, and then finding fault and criticism. And before you know it, you'll go mad, just like they are going crazy.
And I try to stay, you know, I see it like it's swirling around me, you know, like
right, exactly.
It's appearance that's coming to me.
Yes, it is.
So that kind of keeps me grounded from getting, you know, carried away with it or going down the spiral and all that stuff.
Exactly. You've got no choice, Catherine. The world is full of crazy people. We've got to stay strong in the face of them. That's what the wisdom wing brings. And that, putting it in Buddhist terms, it means giving up your attachment to everything to be lovely, giving up your aversion and your panic and your fear when things go wrong. That's essentially it. We've got no choice, darling.
So would a good thing to do be like take, you know, one of these negative behaviors that I see out there that, you know, in others, and then look in myself and see how I have that and
that's my point.
Carrying that
that's my entire point. That's my point. Because if you know attachment and how it works, and you know anger and how it works, and you know about how we make up, you know, like say when you're in a relationship, let's say, and then you think your boyfriend doesn't love you, look at the conspiracy theories in your head. Look at the paranoia. You imagine he did this and he did this and he did this. Well, that's what the world thinks. People are going out of control with conspiracy theories, which is out of control anger, out of control paranoia, making up rubbish. We all know about that in our own individual relationships. So when you recognize your own mind, you can see it in others. That has to be the learning. And the more you know about your own mind, the more you will see it in others, and the more you'll then able to have some compassion and not go crazy when you see it. Okay. That's the way to put it, darling.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Good, darling. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, look, it's 9:25. Hang your breeches on the line. It's 8:25, sorry. What else, darling people? And then any more questions there in the chat? Are there more questions, Dundrup, Venerable Dundrup?
No.
Well, I don't know. I think it's enough. Interesting conversation. These conversations about the mind, so fascinating. I mean, this is not easy. Compassion, you know, I'll finish with this. Compassion, it just all sounds lovely, you know. Oh, I love compassion. Many people like Buddhism, oh, compassion. But really, I mean, compassion is intensely difficult. Because we're only prepared to have compassion for about 1.5 people, pussycats and a few children. As long as they're innocent. That's not compassion. That's sentimental rubbish. I mean, Catherine, everybody's point is coming down to the same thing, you know. The more you see your own mind, the more you know your own attachment, your own neediness, and your own emotional hunger to have everything lovely, the more you have a panic attack when it's not lovely, then you just project that outside and you can see the entire world, you know. And of course, as Samia said, it's difficult. It's difficult to see all these ignorant people. Yes, but that's part of the deal. It's like sort of I always think playing tennis is a good analogy. You're playing tennis with Federer. Well, I mean, you can't have a mental breakdown every time he hits a big ball to you. You've got to be brave enough to know how to hit the ball back. Otherwise, we'll all lose them. We'll all go crazy, you know. So Catherine's one too. Either you isolate yourself completely and don't look at the world, or you learn from the world. And then instead of having this separation, you know, how dare all these crazy people be this way, which is anger. It's anger, Catherine. It's very simple. It's anger. Then that makes you crazy. When you know your anger, which is the response when your attachment doesn't get what it wants, then you can understand it. So the more you work on your own mind, that's what makes us steady. That's what makes us brave. And then, like in Samya's case, being an activist, a political activist, then she can be brave enough to act because she'll know this is what she's dealing with. We don't get a surprise every time idiot people start fighting with us and arguing with us and doing dumb things. That's what courage is, you know, and then never give up. But it's one step at a time. And the Skylar with a mum, it's the same. It's the same variation. Every single example is the same, I tell you. So one step at a time, people. Be brave. That'll do, okay? So if there's 1% of anything that's useful, put it into practice. Shut your mouth, Skylar. That's better for everybody. But maybe speak out loud, Samya, and expect people won't like you. Catherine, you're not talking to anybody. Just work on your own mind. Everybody. Thank you, darlings. Much love. So kind. Thank you, Donald. Thank you very much. Happy to meet you, JD. Happy to meet all you new people.
Thank you.
And keep moving, okay, folks? Keep moving, keep moving. Never give up, never give up, never give up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, darling.
As always, Venerable.
I'm sorry I had to switch to my iPad. I hate the iPad, but it worked. Thank you, darlings. Much love. Good night.